Hello. Strength does not come from winning. Your struggles develop your strengths. When you go through hardships and decide not to surrender, that is strength. Through his teachings, Gandhi, a Hindu political leader, says that our given situation does not affect our outcome, which could be remembered as we learn about the Indian partition. In August 1947, India gained independence after 200 years of British rule. What followed was one of the largest and bloodiest forced migrations in the history of the world. First, we will go over a brief history of the British colonization of the Indian subcontinent, and second, we will inspect the partition of India and why it split into two different countries, and lastly, my third point will highlight the aftermath of the Indian partition. Before British colonization, India was a patchwork of regional kingdoms with their own culture and religions. According to Britannica, last updated on June 22nd of 2022, India is populated by Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, Jains, Buddhists, Christians, Parsis, and Jews. Then, in the 1500s, the British established colonies in India, and they were known as the English East India Company. The English East India Company ruled some provinces directly and princely states indirectly. This is the map highlighting the territories that the British East India British Company ruled. So the pink represents princely states that are sovereign. The yellow represents British territories that the British ruled directly. Each princely state had its own traditions, backgrounds, and leadership. Princely states are considered to be sovereign, but were known to make political and financial concessions to the British. The Indian people began to revolt as they became classified by the British. According to Scholar Blogs, last updated on September 13th of 2020, the British began to categorize Indians by religious identity, which was an ugly simplification of the communities in India. They were counted Hindus as the majority and all other religions as minorities, with Muslims being the largest minority. Sikhs were considered to be Hindus by everyone except for themselves. In elections, people could only vote for candidates of their own religion. These practices exacerbated differences and augmented conflicts between communities, which ignited anti-colonial movements in the beginning of the 20th century. The British limiting Indian freedoms was the fuel needed to spark India's fight for independence. After World War II, the British finally caved after huge financial strain from the war. Finally, British was going to leave India after years of resistance and anti-colonial movements. According to Penn State University last update on April 5, 2019, the British were afraid that the violence following the movements was going to lead to a civil war, so they wanted to speed up the exit as soon as possible. The British could not afford to keep its Indian territory, so they had to expedite the country. The British suggested a full withdrawal by 1948, however, a new viceroy to India was appointed and announced the withdrawal would happen a year sooner. The British gave little information on how they were going to achieve it. Now, what was supposed to take Britain a year was supposed to happen in 5 weeks. According to Origins, last updated on June 24th of 2002, a British lawyer named Cyril Radcliffe was tasked with breaking up India into 2 countries. Cyril had never stepped foot in India and was given 36 days to do it. Cyril's only resources was outdated maps, inaccurate census numbers, and minimal knowledge of the land, because it was too hot to undertake field work. If we look at the map, we can see that the boundary community divided up 3 provinces that were under direct British rule, which was Bengal, Punjab, and Assam. Punjab and Bengal later became Pakistan and East Pakistan, while the rest became India. They decided on these borders because where Hindu and Muslims were majorities and factored location and population percentages. Princely states on the border had to choose which of the new nations to join, losing their sovereignty in the process. He did not give the princely state Kashmir to either country. Cyril finished 2 weeks before independence, but the viceroy decided to keep it secret until independence. So, the newly declared boundaries of the 2 nations was hastily drawn up by a British lawyer that has never visited the land, So, of course, this would lead to dire consequences as we examine the aftermath of the partition. Since the maps were kept secret until Independence Day, Muslims and Hindus began to migrate without knowing where the boundaries were. According to Columbia University, last updated on March 16th of 2019, while the British Boundary Committee worked on a new map, Hindus and Muslims started to move to places where they thought they would be safe. In the period of 2 years, millions of Hindus and Sikhs living in Pakistan left for India, while Muslims living in India fled villages where their families had lived for centuries. In the destabilized India that the British left behind, radicalized militias and local groups massacred migrants. Much of the violence occurred in Punjab. Many families who moved temporary moves became permanently displaced, and borders continued to be disputed. According to New Yorker, last update on June 22nd of 2015, in 1971, East Pakistan succeeded and became the new country of Bangladesh. Over here, we could see the current map of India. And in 1971, India strongly supported East Pakistan in the succession movement conflict with Pakistan in 1971. India's armed forces achieved a swift victory, which led to the creation of Bangladesh. Meanwhile, the Hindu ruler of Kashmir decided to join India, a decision that was finalized by a public referendum of the majority Muslim population. That referendum still hasn't happened as of 2022. And India and Pakistan have been warring over Kashmir since 1947. More than 70 years later, that partition still casts a shadow over 1.6 billion people. Before colonization, India was a patchwork of regional kingdoms and communities that coexisted as two powerful countries that coexisted, and now are two powerful countries warring over each other. Today, we went over early beginnings of British East India and how and why the partition drew up, and the aftermath of it. To this very day, the partition's legacy still lives on in the bitter feud between two powerful rivals and the memories of grieving families. As we are reminded by Gandhi's words, we should remember that no matter what situation comes at us, it is what we make of it that matters.